Hi there. Welcome, everybody. We so appreciate you joining. My name is Bethany Teachman, and I am a professor of clinical psychology and director of clinical training at University of Virginia, and also have the pleasure of co-directing Thriving Youth in a Digital Environment. Um, so this is our final speaker session in our digital health industry summer speaker series. We've had a great lineup of talks and really want to express our appreciation to the Society of Behavioral Medicine for co-sponsoring this series. And really thrilled that you'll get to join us today to hear from Sara L and Sara SH. So we're really excited to have the chance to talk with them. As I mentioned, Thriving Youth in a Digital Environment is hosting this event, and we are an initiative at the University of Virginia that's really designed to address two big questions. One is recognizing that youth are spending a lot of time working with technology and on screens. We want to understand the impacts of technology on their mental health, positive impacts, negative impacts, and when it's just another context for development. And then secondly, given youth are spending so much time on screen, can we harness technology in order to help youth get the most help when and where they need it most? And we have lots of different activities that we do as part of that, including some traditional academic things, sea grants, and typical types of scholarship, and then lots of outreach with industry, community engagement, lots of youth engagement. As a part of what we're trying to do is really center teens' voice in figuring out solutions that will work for them. And so that brings us today to some of the other pieces that we're doing, which is part of our focus on the industry side of things. So we have just launched an industry affiliate program. The QR code is there if you want to go and check it out, and I encourage you to take a look. This is where, for the first time, we're really formalizing the relationships that we've been building with our industry partners. But any individual who is a member, sees themselves as working in the digital mental health industry is very welcome to complete the form and join us. And the idea is this is a way to really facilitate opportunities for collaboration with TYDE, with faculty that are here. We also have some partnership development grants that bring together the academic side and industry and really encourage people to check it out and get involved. Today, though, I want to get to why you have all joined, which is the chance to hear Dr. Sara Levens and Dr. Sara Sagui Henson. And I'll invite them to come out now so I can introduce some of the great work that they've been doing. Hi there. Great to see you. So, hi, welcome. So I am thrilled to have both. They're going to go by Dr. Sara and Dr. Levin since we have two Saras joining us today. So we'll do our best to make sure that everyone knows who we are talking about. As we get going and I start the introductions, for those who are watching today, we would love it if you could put into chat kind of what your role is. So we'd love to know if you see yourself as a student, a trainee, if you see yourself as an academic, if you see yourself working in industry or whatever is your way of identifying yourself. It helps us to know sort of who we're talking to. So I am thrilled to have Dr. Sara Levens join us, who is an associate professor of psychology at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. And she directs the Levens Interdisciplinary Affect and Behavioral Regulation Lab, which examines the role of emotion in health behavior change and seeks to leverage emotion to increase the effectiveness of health behavior interventions. Dr. Levens has received extensive funding from many organizations, Department of Defense, NSF, NIH, Cancer Research United Kingdom, and she coordinates the behavioral science concentration in the health psychology doctoral program and seeks to expand partnerships between academia and industry as part of graduate student training. Welcome. In addition, we are thrilled to have Dr. Sara Sagui Henson, who is a health psychologist, research scientist, and founder of Balance Research Consulting, which is an independent firm helping digital health companies generate evidence and translate value that is scientifically rigorous, practical to implement, and commercially relevant. She has more than a decade of evidence generation experience and really a passion for leveraging technology to solve important healthcare problems. She loves using science and real-world data to evaluate how innovative products and services in the digital health space can improve equitable access and health outcomes. And I will also say that Dr. Sara has been honestly just an invaluable and tremendous member of TIDE's internship program team for some time now, really bringing her deep experience and passion for mentoring and training. So I know that we are in for quite a conversation today. So let me turn it over to you both now to just briefly introduce yourselves, anything else you want to add, and particularly describe the partnership that you've been working on together. And let us know if you have any conflicts of interest that you want to share. So, Dr. Sara, would you start us off?
Yes, absolutely. So happy to be here today and so happy to support the TIDE program. I got connected to UVA TIDE through SDMH, the Society for Digital Mental Health, which is a newer, really rapidly growing, exciting conference and society in the area of health tech as it relates to mental health. And so joined, UVA TIDE's steering committee for their summer internship last year. They're running their second round of that right now, and it's just such a fantastic program that really just deeply cares about the students. So I've been very excited to be involved in it. I will also add that I guess in terms of conflicts of interest, the internship that we'll be talking about today was hosted when I was working at Modern Health. So I used to be an employee there, and I still hold equity there. And then, kind of a cheeky conflict of interest is that I used to be Dr. Levens' PhD student. She was my graduate mentor in my PhD program, and just to shout her out, she was always such a champion of student career paths in whatever direction they took. And as I've been in industry for over 6 years now, I've talked to a lot of different colleagues who didn't maybe have that experience with their advisor being so supportive. Some people had the complete opposite experience. And so it's just really nice to continue collaborating with her and to talk today about the internship we set up, which is further supports her passion and interest in supporting students in applying their expertise in this really great area. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Levens.
Thank you,
Yes.
Dr. Sarah. Um, so I'm thrilled to be here. I actually I can't remember how I first found out about Tide because it was probably through multiple kind of like streams at once in terms of through you, Sarah, and then through also just looking for, internship programs and opportunities for my students. So um, as indicated, I am the coordinator for our behavioral science concentration within our health psychology doctoral program, and so I have been a real champion of academic and industry partnerships for quite some time. I happen to think that they fit together very, very well as puzzle pieces that can really each kind of satisfy unique needs from the other. And so I'm really looking forward to kind of expanding upon that with questions that people have and how you can potentially sort of um, how you might be able to leverage the things that you have at your university to make them more attractive and how you kind of position yourself to collaborate with industry. So, and I'll also say that I'm here, for like participating in this speaker series right now. But if you would like to reach out to me at any time, you can please do so. Um, we'll be sharing the link to my the behavioral science concentration that I'm affiliated with, so you can check that out anytime. And we have a number of pieces that we and kind of pieces that we have in the program that actually really facilitate industry partnership. So I'm just really excited to be here today. I don't have any conflict of interest to report. Sarah also already basically said, our existing, relationship. And but I think that, and I'll start with just that piece of how I know we have some trainees in the audience, but it's so important, like in academia, for example, when, I tell students that when you're getting your PhD, like you are now like a part of like the process of continuing like PhDs because only PhDs can make other PhDs. And so it's so important to remember your role in that larger sort of educational system.
Right.
But this also stays true for aspects of industry. Once you leave, like, and you form connections, then you can come back and keep those connections going and offer, routes towards, trainees in the programs that you came from. So you are, even if you go into industry, you're still a part of this training process of how we can we can build the things that Dr. Sara and I have built in terms of providing training to existing students that also greatly improves, like the reach of industry. And so I'm just really excited to be here today.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to dive into some questions because I know we discussed some in advance and we've already had some audience questions coming in, which is fantastic. So please use the Q&A as you want to add questions and we'll try to hit as many as we can. We'll see how we do. Dr. Sara, let me start with you. I am curious to hear your thoughts on how the definition of career success has shifted in psych programs and in industry over the last 5 years. And maybe we'll get you to maybe highlight the industry side, and then Dr. Levens can highlight the psychology program side of things.
Yes, absolutely. I'm very excited to hear Dr. Levin's answer on this, honestly, too. So I think that just to step back for a minute and describe my career trajectory, I did my PhD in health psychology with Dr. Levens at UNC Charlotte. Then I went and did a 2-year postdoc at the University of California, San Francisco in integrative medicine. And that was sort of a launching point to try and figure out what I wanted to do with my career. At the time, I still was interested in an academic path, but was trying to figure out what type of university I wanted to work at the most and what all of my different interests were. As a postdoc, I felt like a generalist a lot in my interests. I had a lot of things going. I had a lot of different research studies and a lot of different research interests. And so sometimes for me personally, and I've shared this in other contexts, it felt difficult to just pick one lane to stay in, as that needs to happen, in academia. And so as a function of being in San Francisco, I started hearing about these different health tech companies that were starting up. This was back in 2018, 2019, and how they were hiring, PhD psychologists to come and work for them, and how they really needed people with behavioral science, behavioral medicine, research expertise in order to validate their products, do R&D for their products, and share the value with buyers. And so I took my first job in 2020 at a company called Modern Health. They are a global mental health provider that connects people to services through their employer. So they're an employer-sponsored mental health benefit. And I was their first research hire in 2020. And I worked there for 6 years. I loved working there. I had an incredible team. And just this year, I've branched out on my own and have been using my skills and expertise that I learned there to help other digital health companies do the same thing, which is build up an evidence generation pipeline that really can, highlight and show their value. So for me, like in industry, when you're thinking about career success, I would say that breaking into industry, like it can be challenging. I think it used to be more challenging because there were not these types of mechanisms. So I'm seeing so much appetite and interest from students in terms of joining these internship programs or trying to work with a digital health company while they're in grad school or in postdoc by doing a data analysis project or doing a publication on the side. Or just the amount of outreach that I get on LinkedIn from people who want to, trainees who want to do informational interviews. And so I would say that for people who want to go into industry, landing an industry, your first industry position is certainly a big deal in terms of success of breaking in. But then after that, I think it really is about the impact in industry. And that's sometimes a little bit of a mindset shift from academia, from describing what you do as an expert to describing the impact that you had on the patient population that you're working with. So I would say that a lot of the metrics that we use to determine success in industry, or when you are going and pitching yourself for an industry position, is really thinking about what was the impact that you had on, employees seeking mental health services, the research that you did in your previous job or in academia. What how many people did you get to engage in the intervention that you were developing? How many people improved from it? What were the different types of ways they improved? Did their symptoms reduce? Did their quality of life improve? And then, of course, later when you're working more in industry, the health economic side piece comes up a
Right.
lot. And so you're talking about, what kind of healthcare spending did you offset by offering this type of intervention?
No, that's great. So it sounds like a lot of similarities in ways you would show impact, but a little bit more on the health economic side, and that
and
reach
and
piece.
clinical outcomes, yeah.
Right. And I feel like clinical outcomes you probably report in both settings, but there would be a different emphasis in terms of what that looks like. Oh, great. Dr. Levens, how would you share about how career success has shifted?
So I think this has been interesting, but just because going over the scope of my own career in terms of starting, like I remember going to grad school, and at that point, like industry was like the dark side, and so it was like, oh, if you're like you're leaving academia and stuff like that, and it was just this big sort of, and so there's um, I think uh, it's hard for me to tell how much residual stuff that is because I have like left that bandwagon a while ago. So, um, but
But you're saying it still does exist to some
it does.
extent.
Yes.
For
Yes.
sure.
Yeah.
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 Yes, it absolutely does. So like you were alluding to like someone saying, "Oh, I want to go into like, industry as opposed to academia and how supportive advisors can be for that." So from my perspective, my role is simply to, like, help you guys as, students, whether you're in, my undergraduate, master's or doctoral programs, find the things that would be fulfilling paths for you career wise. And
Mhm.
so I do think that success has an element of fulfillment. I think that's extremely important. And so, there is, of course, a monetary element of like, there's a basic thing right now. It's like, hey, if you get aspects of the job, you get, there's a lot of uncertainty right now. So I do want to kind of comment on like some basic success is like, like there's a huge accomplishment to actually just land, positions and have, access
For
to that
sure.
and that security and things like that. So, I think that things have definitely shifted more in terms of being more open. I think the current kind of like social political climate, which is quite complex, is actually, like supporting more people shifting over to industry because academic positions are just fewer. And so there are like real basic elements, to those types of things. I feel like if industry had been more of like I have wondered if industry had been something more of a thing when I was,
Mhm.
graduating this more, would I have gone there? I'm not completely sure because I love mentoring. And so for me, success is really about, again, matching sort of your personal
Right.
passions and interests with aspects of your job. And so, and wherever that is for a person, like, that's where it is. It's not my, job to determine that, for someone and tell them like what that combination is. Um, and but in terms of, and then on top of that, those personal pieces, then we have the industry and academia metrics of success. And those are oftentimes very, very different
Mhm.
from what, personal fulfillment versus, like your job kind of views of success and things like that. Um, academia is a service-oriented position, and that can place us in challenging positions because then we are expected to act in that like, well, part of this is sort of service, and that like our job has become very overburdened in things that we're expected to do and that like well academics we're service we're teachers we should and I think those are really difficult places. So I think an important thing to talk about is just how the landscape is changing and how important it is to basically try to seek out what where you would find interest passion and security. I love mentoring and that is one of my absolute favorite parts of my job. And Dr. Sarah knows that from long ago. And so, and I don't, but I also don't know if I would have had that opportunity in industry. And so you do need to figure out aspects of like what fits with you.
Right.
And that matching is so essential. Um,
And could I
And
could I ask a
yeah,
question? And I don't want to spend like too much time on this topic, but could I ask a question that I don't know for sure the answer to? And so I would love to hear more. In healthcare, we think a lot about incentives and sometimes misaligned incentives. And I've heard that there are incentives for graduate programs to place their PhDs in academia, and that graduate program chairs are evaluated on how many they place in there. And so that can create sort of a misaligned incentive for going into industry because they feel like they're losing PhDs to the academic system. Is that something that you've heard of or dealt with?
it's not something that it's not a metric that we keep track of, or
Okay.
anything like that. If we place people, if like we do keep track of where all of our alumni are, and if they are in industry positions, we view that as success. There may be programs, there is an element again to the sort of like, oh, like once you leave academia, but there are people that leave and that now also come back. I think lots of things between those lines that used to be really, really hard are not so much anymore. And you have people that, now what you wouldn't, like senior faculty who are leaving for industry, multiple colleagues of mine, not so much in my department, but other departments have, left for industry. They could conceivably come back and also in positions that now that then they can bring that industry expertise back in terms of training. So I think a lot of those things are shifting, but they do very much differ based upon the school that you're in. And I think UNC Charlotte, my institution, is relatively forward thinking in that regard. And I know that other institutions are not. Um, and just keep in mind that it's like this is your person, it's you and your person and your job and how you're going to be spending your life, and how graduate programs keep track of it should not really be as much of a factor in my opinion. And I'm in graduate leadership, so yeah.
I think there are disciplinary differences too, just to answer your question, Dr. Sarah. So I 100% agree that, my goal is to help all students figure out where their passion is and where they're best positioned to contribute, period. Um, it is the case, though, for example, for clinical psychology accreditation, we do actually report some of those outcomes.
Yeah.
And when we are reviewed by like president's office, dean's office, things like that, they do ask us to report those outcomes and we have to track all of our alumni. So I wouldn't say we get like crazy pressure. And the people I work with, my colleagues, also feel like we just want to help people figure out where they can contribute best with the degree. But some of our accreditation materials do directly require us to track that. And so there is the incentives you're describing are not, I think, are absolutely valid. And certainly in clinical psych, we do see
Good.
that.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
do, I do, I do know that we do like keep track of that stuff a little bit more with our clinical students, but a lot of
Yeah.
them will go into working at, medical campuses, and oftentimes like which, sometimes they can be in positions that are actually a little bit more similar to industry than academia. And so I think just those lines in general are getting a little bit more blurred, but that's a great question.
Sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Let me hit on, we have a couple of questions coming in from the audience.
Mm.
First, many behavioral science and health psychology programs are preparing students for careers in an industry that their faculty have never worked in. If we take that seriously, do we need to rethink the structure of academic training itself, not just add an internship or an adjunct course, but create models where faculty and labs are meaningfully engaged with industry through consulting, applied research, other partnerships, and what would have to change for that to work? So a very big question.
What a great
So maybe,
question.
It's a
yeah, for
great question.
sure, for
Yeah.
sure.
I'll take I'll take
So Dr. Levens, do you want to take it from the like
yeah, I'll take a
training
first
program
stab
side, and then
because
Dr. Sarah from, what you would need to see skills wise?
that actually question captures a lot of what we are aiming for with setting up these industry internships. And so there are a couple of things that one, like it's really important to, just address the sort of the cultural piece that we've kind of been talking about to start with in terms of like, industry can't be thought of as the dark side. This is again, this pairing between academia and industry. So as as Dr. Sarah talked about, like looking at, oh, what are the things that we're doing in terms of how this is helping actual individuals, and, like that are connected with her company. So industry has access to people, which is something that academia does not really so much. And so there's a real challenge, like I think a lot of this capture is just translational research in general. How do you get research from in the lab to sort of outside? And there's massive gaps in sort of all of these interventions that have been developed, but then how do we make them scalable? How do we make them accessible? And then millions of dollars have been spent, and they're with no understanding of how to get this stuff actually out to the community and to the taxpayers that pay, essentially for all of our research. And so I think industry is like, you know, if done right and carefully, offers a full route towards, reaching people where you can have that sort of interim step of, hey, we still can have really controlled settings where we can, look at um, interventions that are happening. We know all sorts of like individual information, work professions, all that kind of stuff, so that we can almost have this interim step that is, like outside of the lab and more in line with like, you know, um, individuals accessing this, that is a really nice like step on the route towards like how do we get and learn, and when we take the stuff out of the lab, does it still work? So industry provides a really nice step towards that point. And so, and then a key thing that in the past was sort of going over the dark side was actually a big place in terms of ethics. And this is where I think there's like, how do you go ahead and be like, well, the company wants, like this, they want the data to like tell this story, but the data tells a different story. And it's so important, to when in training to be like what, like pay attention to the data, what the data says. And then this is something that you could find yourself. I have colleagues that have collaborated with industry, and they were like, well, look, they wanted us to go ahead and come up with data to support their goal of getting this product out there, when parts of it were actually like not, quite as ethical. And so then they kind of left, that position. And one, this was a consulting position with like larger companies. And so a big important thing is to find the industry positions that really work for you and match, again, the same sort of space of your value systems and stuff like that. But that was, so we actively tried to build industry training in. So we start from day one when we are working with individuals, or people interested in our program. We say that we train for both academia and industry. And so we have invited people such as Dr. Sara to come back and talk about their experiences. We have set up industry partnerships. So one of the things that we have that has been really helpful is we have a research practicum with our behavioral science students. And so they have to do this research practicum. It's 90 hours, and it can take place over the semester or over a summer. And that has been a major stepping stone in terms of connecting our students with industry positions, because they start as volunteer positions and then they translate to, wow, this person has really contributed in this short period of time. And then and a number of the positions that we've set up with Modern Health and with just other collaborations that we have. Modern Health has been very formal. So we have like, so we can recruit for it and stuff like that. But then we have a lot more like informal sort of practicum experiences that then lead to paid opportunities for those students in terms of so we do have some very specific things in place, and we tried to actually build our Modern Health internship to actually really um, create this integrated training space. And so I will pass it on to you, Sarah.
Yeah, absolutely. What a great question with so many, different like pieces to it. And I would say, since Sarah kind of covered, Dr. Levens kind of covered the what her program does and what we set up with the internship, which I know we're going to get into in more detail, I'll just sort of take the role of like pontificating about what could be even more. of an integration. And one thing that comes to mind is having industry professionals serve on thesis and dissertation committees. That's not a model that I've seen before, I don't think. But that seems like it would be really relevant to if a student's really interested in pursuing industry, to have someone on on that committee. What comes up is just like where is the time and where's the infrastructure and where's the resources coming from, of course. So if you wanted to have an industry person join the committee, you would need to have somebody who is willing to do that, as a service activity, in terms of paying it forward or paying it back, which I know many of my colleagues are interested in doing, but possibly not all of them, wanting to do that volunteer work. And then on the other side, like having worked at Modern Health and having tried to set up different partnerships at academic universities, or for example, like having worked with the Society of Behavioral Medicine, who I think is sponsoring this session, in trying to figure out how to connect academic scientists with industry. It's not every academic scientist that can work with an industry partner, because academics are very busy. Their primary work usually takes precedence over the industry work that they're doing. And they can tend to work at a different pace than industry. And everyone's probably heard this a lot. Oh, industry works so quickly. And it does. It works over like, a quarter like everybody plans. And that's a chunk of time, is to get something done in one quarter. And so I had kind of like starts and stops with different academic partners where they would be really interested and we would try to set something up, and then they would get busy with the semester, and then they would need to be grading stuff, and then it was summer, and then it wasn't the right time. And so it really does have to be the right fit of an academic to plug into industry. And so trying to figure that out, I remember I was working with SBM on their academic directory. They have this huge directory of scientists that can list their expertise. And they were offering that to industry, and they felt like that was a really good offering to industry. And my point was, this feels really overwhelming for me to have to sift through 500 plus different scientists. And I don't really know if they have time to work with industry. I don't know if they really see the value in the types of like real world data that we have, because it's messy, but it's really large data sets, and like we see the value in it. But so I was trying to help them maybe figure out, could there be places in the industry directory where you fill out what your previous industry experience is, or what you're really like looking for and searching for, and then having filters that could drop down to connect those types of people. Those are just a few thoughts.
Right. No, that's great. And I will say that's some of what you're talking about is what's motivated our industry affiliate program that I mentioned in the intro, because we're directly kind of helping to match people rather than it sort of being just a.
Yeah. And how illuminating was it to have the industry folks on your steering committee, Bethany, where you would say, hey, how do we pitch this internship to the companies? And we would all say, oh, there are things that you will want to say. You will want to, make sure that you have the value proposition for the internship to the company, because the company does want highly trained people, but in turns also, and I think we might get to this, they require more oversight. And so how do you really pitch that and find that overlap of where they're going to deliver expertise, but industry also feels like it's worth the value of the training and oversight that's needed for them?
No, absolutely. This question is for you, Dr. Sara, that came in. If possible, I'd love to hear how to identify where to go in industry. There seem to be plenty of pathways, and it can be difficult to decide a best fit.
Oh my gosh. Well, I can really only speak from like the digital health industry side, but of course, industry is an umbrella that encompasses, I don't know, any job outside of academia. I'm not really sure how wide the net could be, but there are so many. I mean, I've seen people work in, UX research at Vanguard, in the financial services industry, or at Toyota, or, I have a colleague who was in our program who works at the American Institute for Physics. doing research, and she's a psychologist. So there are so many different paths. So I really can only speak on what spoke to me, which was that my degree was in health psychology, and I knew that what I wanted to do was research in health, and that
Right.
could mean that it was anywhere. It could be in community health, it could be in nonprofits, it could be in for-profit companies, it could be in academia. But I just knew I wanted to do something in health. And so then, of course, yeah, industry in health can include nonprofit work, it can include government agencies, it can include for profit. I ended up finding the for profit path just because that's where the most people I knew were working, and that's what like seemed like they needed the most scientists at the time. And and there were other logistical things that worked well for me in my life, like including remote work, which suits me very well. And also feeling like I'm getting paid my worth for my expertise. And so when you're looking in the digital health industry, I would say that try to key into some of the like newsletters. Try to find yourself some good newsletters that are broadly reporting on the digital health industry. And I can come up with some resources in a sheet that I can share after this. But in
Great.
terms of the whole spectrum, there's obviously digital mental health, but there's so many different companies and areas. I would say that in mental health, if you look at the behavioral health tech BHT website and go to the list of companies that participate in that organization, that's a pretty comprehensive list of all the companies that are in the digital mental health space.
Can I jump in just for a second? Because
Yeah.
this is incredibly valuable, and I think that that resource list would be fabulous. I interpreted the question as actually asking more about, or in addition, asking about like what makes you decide a research path, clinical product development, QA, user
Oh,
experience, like the roles within. And so, can you talk a little bit about that piece
yes.
of it?
Yes. I thought they were talking about sort of more like the vertical of health to work in,
Totally,
of like,
totally.
okay, great. Okay. Yeah. So, okay. So my experience is, as a behavioral scientist within psychology. So I'm not a clinical psychologist. So for me, my options are quote unquote more limited. I'm very happy with my options as I chose not to be a clinician. So I'm really looking at, research focused roles as my primary interest. But I know that my clinical psych folks have a lot of different opportunities that they could work in. They could, like you said, Bethany, they could go into clinical product roles. They could go into quality management roles. They could go into content development roles. They could go into research roles. And so it kind of just harkens back to what do you feel most excited about? Do you love writing, and do you love, creating content and working on, I had a colleague at Modern Health, Dr. Cliff Burwise, who was in charge of all of our content. So creating all of the meditations and the programs, and really translating everything that he knew about therapeutic techniques and clinical psychology into a digital environment. So into a place where, people could be using the app to learn about CBT skills and to learn about ACT and DBT and things like that. I have another colleague who works at Modern Health, Dr. Sharon Aduse. She is like hard in clinical product, and now she's an expert in AI as it relates to mental health,
Mm.
and really how are we creating the safety guardrails for AI chatbots and that kind of thing. And so so I would say it just kind of depends on what excites you about what you did in academia, in terms of if you still want to be really involved in the clinical aspects of it, or if you want to be more in the research and evaluation and translation side. One more role I'll mention really quick is on on that translation side, which is, do you just love communicating science? And so my colleague at Modern Health, Dr. Jessica Watrous, who became our chief clinical officer, she started in research translation, basically. So working in more of like a clinical sales environment. She was the clinical expert on all of the sales and partnerships calls, really translating everything the clinical team was doing and our model and our research to a commercial non-scientific audience. So doing that kind of scientific affairs component as well, if you enjoy talking to people and connecting and translating.
No, that's fantastic. And we heard back from the person that both aspects of the question were very, they
Oh,
appreciated
great.
both of them. Um, Dr. Levens, I'm going to turn the next one to you. So the question is asking, which I think is it's a tricky one that I will say I struggle with too. Given that the digital mental health field already has a large number of apps and interventions, many of which don't have rigorous or longitudinal evaluation, what level of empirical evidence should PhD students aim to establish before developing a sort of new tool and trying to get it out, whether commercialization or sort of growing it in those different ways? So, at what point is creating a new tool justified by a genuine gap in the literature rather than adding yet another intervention to an already crowded uh, pool of interventions?
Mm. So I think the key piece there is the identification of a gap. So you have like, is there a new app, like justified, you have this gap, how many, like how many existing apps or programs are trying to target that gap? So how saturated is the market to a certain extent? And so, and this is going to be, this goes into a real sort of entrepreneurial space, which like would probably be a whole other sort of a whole other like conversational series and
Right.
everything, and maybe something to take note on because there is very, very much like, and like entrepreneurially, we've had Dr. Sarah has started her own consulting business. We've had other students that have started their own businesses. And I think one of the pieces to highlight at that point, it's not just, you have this gap, but it's not just the gap. It's how well you can, communicate how you have met that gap. Do you like when you're starting your own sort of app, like, you're starting your own, you're starting your own company, just to put it like,
Mhm.
succinctly, then there's all the facets that are involved in that. You're
Right.
going to have to market it. You're going to have to, so thinking, I think it's not just about like, oh, you have this gap, you have this. Do you have all of that? Because a big part that we haven't talked about all of this and stuff like that is how much this stuff is still team science. We're
Mm.
talking about these things individually, but if you want, like you're going to have a higher likelihood of making an impact, of better addressing the gap, if you're going to have multiple perspectives, multiple expertise, you have a team of people. It's very, very challenging after going to, like from even just attending SBM for the past couple of years. you know, Students will trainees and everyone at various levels will come in and be like, here we, like they will present aspects of their app as like a talk and things like that. And it's not really clear, how is this going to go forward? Is this going to be something that's going to be sustainable where someone can earn income and things like that? And because then, the real answers to that are like really get down to sort of like entrepreneurially, like what are the pieces that actually, determine whether a company succeeds. It's not just whether you have a good idea and you have enough
Right.
evidence to support that idea. And so there's because you can have a good idea and enough evidence to support it, but how scalable is it? How accessible is it? There are so many apps. So how would you get your app to the people that would need it to have access to it to prove aspects of its effectiveness and things like that? And so it may actually be that there might be more interim steps. Do you partner with other people in industry to go ahead and test out some of these things? Do you like join with another group that is, so I think a lot of these things are actually being worked out in real time as we're figuring out and navigating the fact that like we have AI that can now do all sorts of things in a really, short period of time. You can design them, you can this, that I think what determines those types of things, we have so much stuff influxing the market is going to be how you can kind of get your, like app or your idea design attached with other things that are going to give it legs. And so I think the answers to that are, like are in the end a bit more complex in terms of that would be better determined based on like, more specific conversations. But a big
Yeah, I
space
would.
that
Oh,
to just end is regardless of whether you're going into academia or industry, connections and networking is huge.
Sure.
And so like even when we were, even when Dr. Sarah was applying for postdoc positions and stuff like that, she was applying for positions, and those individuals knew me. Like so, like they knew me either personally, they knew my graduate mentor. So there are these sort of familial kind of like, sort of like, but the same thing happens in industry. Once you know of so and so, this, oh, how they train their students, like we had an easier time setting up the partnership that we did with Modern Health because Sarah was like a product and a very successful product of our program. And um, so they knew what we were able to provide because they had a stellar person there that was like evidence of that. And so while you have like there's so many other pieces that determine success in terms of, just like a good idea. And so I would, and so unfortunately the answer is like just not so simple. It's a little bit more complex.
And Dr. Sarah, you wanted to jump in there.
Yes, yeah. I wanted to add that um, it's really exciting to see more and more clinician scientists becoming founders because, especially more women, because they have the expertise to, and they have the in-depth healthcare and clinical and medical knowledge of the gaps that are happening with their patients, to understand what needs to be developed to help those patients. And so, but it's not just knowing about the clinical side and the research side. It's really important to know about the commercial side. And so that's something that we're always, the people that get into industry are always going back to say is, learn this commercial acumen, this business acumen. And the earlier that people can learn it, the better, because there are certain things about starting a business that you need to understand how businesses work. And you don't need an MBA, but you do need a framework about how to commercialize a product and what the total addressable market is, and what some of these different like metrics that, especially if you're going to fundraise, you'll need to know about. And there are different levels of clinical evidence needed at different levels and stages of a company or stages of fundraising. And the last thing I thought of was sometimes what we're doing in the research side and industry is really more of like dissemination and implementation science or health services research, because the interventions have been developed in academia already. We know that CBT is extremely effective. What we don't know is how we can get it to more people and how we can scale it with the number of providers that we have, and the wait times and the disjointed payment systems existing outside of insurance. So those are kind of some of the things that may need solving in healthcare versus
Right.
the actual mechanisms of things.
No, that's super helpful. My goodness, time is flying by. We only have 10 minutes left and many, many questions. So we'll see what we can do here, but this is a great conversation. Another one came in that I think is really interesting, and challenging. So industry often wants academic expertise, but sometimes treats academia primarily as a source of credibility rather than as a true partner. What does good engagement with academic researchers and trainees look like from the industry side? And how can companies create internships or externships that actually develop students' judgment rather than simply give them exposure? So I'll start with you, Dr. Sarah, and then I'll flip it to you, Dr. Levens, to kind of think about it from the vantage point of like, what for you on the academic side suggests this will be a good partnership and it would be a win-win for your students and for the program. So, Dr. Sarah, do you want to start us off?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I just saw a really awesome newsletter on this, and if I can dig it up, I'll try to include it in my resource list at the end. But it was
Great.
talking about how to engage your clinical advisory board in a way that's not just performative. And so this isn't quite on the internship side, but I do feel like this comes up a lot where a
Yeah.
company wants to create a clinical or scientific advisory board, and it really is just to kind of like get the names and the faces on the website. And I'm not going to lie, that is important. And like that is a value add that those academics are providing. But that's only going to go so far. And that's going to be rather shallow when you're thinking about actually improving your product and actually like helping more people and or retaining the customers that you want or attracting new customers. And so I think what this newsletter was talking about was like not just having, these once a quarter, one
Right.
hour meetings with your advisory board where you're saying, hey, can you take a look at this, or kind of like cursory reviews of things, but actually going out and finding someone who's willing to be an advisor that is more plugged in, and setting up more regular meetings with them, and setting up and then there may need to be more discussions about what their compensation is in terms of equity or different things like that. But the value that you're going to get from your clinical and scientific advisors when they're actually having, one-on-one meetings with your team every other week, or they're sitting in on discussions and really hearing about what the problems you're working through are, is just going to be so much more valuable. And it also is going to bring back information to academia, and it's going to, I think it would seep both ways in showing academics, oh, these are the problems that industry is struggling with. These are the types of things that I can share with my students about the skills and things that we can apply in helping solve these problems.
No, that's great. Dr. Levens.
So, a couple of things come to mind. Just building off um, of what Dr. Sarah says, that um, academic, as academics, we often have all sorts of projects going, and so and and if we're in one of these positions, if we're in a sort of a advisory position, then where there is more integration, as Dr. Sarah described, um, then there's room for our full expertise to also, be present, and not just our full expertise in terms of our own, but also the people that we know, and that who do work that would be able to address aspects of needs and stuff like that. So one of the things that I have observed when I have reviewed papers on apps and things like that that people are proposing is, and then these can be complex things like recommender systems and stuff like that, is that who they have on their team, is that they oftentimes like will have computer scientists, engineers, everyone who is designing the pieces, but then they don't actually have um, people on the team who are experts in the theories that they are, like using as a framework. And that is a lot of where like we have like extensive mechanistic and like theoretical background knowledge, because that is our, it's just to absorb, like to profess, like here to learn, and we, pass this on and things like that. And so the more integrated that we can be, then the more that we can support, like beyond what would just necessarily be anticipated in terms of like, oh, what do you give in terms of this name, of this sort of stamp of approval, is that, in my in the work that I have done, that we're able to contribute unique perspectives, or, um, recommend other people who have skill sets and things like that that can be integrated into the team. And so just that provides essentially like a really sort of, a strengthening point. Um, so how much, industry does that, and because it takes extra time, it can take extra money, and companies can kind of go through various points where like, oh, we think we need this additional expertise and value, but now we have enough expertise that we don't, and it can kind of ebb and flow. And so, but those are sort of the pieces that I would add to that. Is um, I have seen a lot of development of products and things like that that I get to through the review stage, and it can be really shocking sometimes how um, the team lacks a lot of depth in terms of like,
Mhm.
that they, this can happen a lot in terms of like, oh, we're using these theory or these affective processes, but then they're actually not. Are they actually measuring them? Can they really say that they're targeting some of the stuff that they're
Mhm.
targeting? And so, so those are the pieces that I would add.
No, that's certainly reminiscent of, how many people have developed programs. And I will say this is both in-person providers and digital tools that say they're CBT, but when you look at what's really going on, it doesn't quite actually live up to that. So I definitely hear what you're saying. We just have a couple minutes left, so I'm going to ask each of you to take, just a minute or two to do two things. Um, Share what's one piece of advice that you would give to someone who's trying to start a similar program to what you have both done so successfully. If they're starting from scratch, what would you advise them? And I assume Dr. Sarah, you'll talk on the industry partner side and Dr. Levens on the training program side. And then one piece of the many things we haven't yet hit on that you want to make sure that you get a chance to share with the group. So Dr. Sarah, would you start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say from the industry side, you want to be a champion of these internships if you want to pay it forward to the students and train them, but also increase the pool of talent that is going to enter the industry. And I know that everybody in industry wishes they had gotten more experience. So when we started working on the internship, it was more of kind of like a pay it forward. But of course, when you're making the business case to your company, you need to put your business hat on and you need to think about what is the strategy of your team, what is the strategy of your company, and how does this internship fit into that, and how does the budget of the internship fit into that. And there is a negotiating that you will need to do with the leadership at your company to say, here's the amount of money that we're going to spend and here is the value that we're going to get out of it, and put in place things that regular checkpoints and milestones and markers so that you are making sure that you're getting the value out of that. For example, we set up the internship program so that when the intern comes in, they pick an independent project using existing data already, and they
Mm,
spend the internship working on doing their own analyses, writing up a paper, and publishing it. And both of the interns that we ran at Modern Health did publish a first author paper using Modern Health
great.
data. And so that was a huge success, and that helped build the business case to continue running the internship. So I would say on the industry side, like put your business case hat on, because uh, you're going to have to also talk about what level of time you're going to need to spend training the intern as well. And sometimes that's a negotiation of like how much time is me as the manager of the intern going to spend managing them versus what we're getting back out of it, and making sure that that is a mutually beneficial balance.
No, that's great. And I'm so sorry, we have just 1 minute left, but Dr. Levens, can you share your piece of advice and last contribution?
So, um, so there's definitely a lot more to say on this from having
Sure.
sort of having set it up in terms of pieces. But one, I would, um, uh, what one of the things that I did early on is I like basically created sort of like a, hey, this is what we can offer.
Mm,
And so I tried to almost put the industry hat on, like here's what you would get for this and stuff like that. And just for example, for a student like part-time, if you're investing in covering, like ideally, we have internships that are going to be summer, internships for practicums that are not paid, but that if you really want to be setting up like really integrative that it would ideally be paying for the student stipend and things like that, then we um I tried to really think like, hey, how much can the company get out of this? These are all the pieces that you can get out. Here's a student, here's this. And the longer that it goes on, the more successful, more able we are to kind of recommend like the students that are going to be the best fit. Like we did this for this last time we have interviews, and this last time um um, Modern Health interviewed, and they, from the number of students, they'd like, well, we like, and I was like, I actually think that this person, while they may not have interviewed so well, is gonna be a stronger fit. So I was able to use aspects of my expertise in terms of my knowledge of the students as their trainees to really help match. And so I think those are um, it's not a passive process. You really want to like be mindful. You have to, we built in pieces that made it easier so that like the data sharing plan, we had this template in place, and then all we would need to do is update or change individuals. So we were really strategic about trying to
Great.
get a couple of pieces in place that would then make it easier to sustain pieces. Um, and then I had another element that I just sort of
And I'm
forgot.
so sorry, I'm going to
Yeah.
jump in at this moment because we're after 1:30 now. But first of all, an enormous thanks to Dr. Sara and Dr. Levens. While we didn't hit on everything, truly, truly appreciate you sharing your insights and wisdom. For those whose questions we weren't able to get to, thank you for submitting them. We'll hang on to them. And Dr. Sara and Dr. Levens have shared contact information that they're happy to continue conversations. But we are so appreciative of the time to share today, and look forward to continuing these conversations. And I encourage folks, if you're interested in getting more involved on industry internship sides, go to TYDE.virginia.edu, and we've got some resources there and information and ways to get connected. So a huge thank you to you both, and I hope everyone has a good rest of their week. Thanks all.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And if there are any faculty here that are interested, I'd like be happy to really set up follow-up conversations where I could go into more detail
Perfect.
about from the university side, because we just weren't able to cover that and
To
how to
get to
kind of
everything,
structure
I
some of those
know.
things. Yeah.
No, I knew know that we have some faculty on, so thank you. Hopefully they'll follow up. Thanks all.